Hello and welcome to another video. Today we have the attribute cache, which is a node that I've been wanting to do for a while, and it is just writing out using a volume any attribute that you want and reading it back in from disk. We've made some improvements to the attribute wedge, including descending, ascending, seeds, and curve weights, along with a new update. We have the align HDRI node now with an invert align. So now the HDRI will align with the directional. So when you set up your directional, you'll be able to load in any HDRI and the sun will automatically be in the same position. We've also added cutouts for writing the HDRI to disk. So there'll be two EXRs with a cutout. And this is the lighting scene for this template. And we'll be going through some of the setups, including like the volume and the simulation for the curves and vines and stuff like that, which will be quite useful to see how I've done this template scene. Also on my Gumroad, there will be a discount for all the tools I've made up until this point. We're going to call this one Season 1. There'll be 25% off as well, so you'll be able to grab that. So right, let's dive into this. Right, so this is the attribute cache. This is a fairly simple node, and it'll be free to download, but it's something that I kind of wanted to just tick off for a while now. So the idea of this is it's a way of caching an attribute or a mask for a geometry that might change underneath. So you might be painting a mask like this, and what will happen is you'll be maybe combining it from point, color, and as well as a texture, or reading it in from an object being close to it as a distance, and then you'll remesh it and the mask will break. I know that attribute paint has a recache strokes, but sometimes it's nice to write out the mask itself to disk and then read it back in so you have it saved. So this is exactly what this HDA does. And what it will do is it will write it only with values are above 0, and it will write it as a volume out to disk, which means it's really light and it's far quicker than writing out the whole geometry and then reading the geometry back in and doing an attribute transfer. So with this one, you have the attribute, you have a version control and location and write, and then you have a voxel scale, and then you have a load from disk. So for instance, if this was a piece of geometry that was getting remeshed, like a terrain or something, and you then moved some of the objects so that it had to remesh the terrain underneath and thus breaking the point order in the attribute paint, you could then use this node itself to read back in the mask. So if I now go on this, you'll see that this is completely broken. Admittedly, with this node, you can do a recache strokes, which will work it. But imagine, you had to figure out how to rebuild this. What you can do is you could just load this from disk, and that will reload in world space exactly where this mask was from the volume that's coming in to here. So if I allow editing of content, I can show you exactly. So what it will be doing is writing out this volume that looks like this. So this will be the attribute, writing it to disk, and then it will be doing a volume transfer from that onto the surface. So quite a handy node to version control masks and to clean what's above in the network, and also to kind of save out something rather than having, if you had a massive terrain and you only painted a little mask in the corner, you wouldn't want to write out, a gig of geometry when you could just write out a small mask. And the benefit of doing this over a texture is that this doesn't need UVs. There's that you can decrease the voxel scale to get precision and stuff like that. So anyway, as I was saying, this is just free to download, but it's something that I've kind of wanted to just tick off for a while. So if you've got any suggestions with this or any problems, give me a shout. Yeah. Right, so here is the attribute wedge, and I've updated and improved some of the functionality of this, which I think you'll find interesting. But previously, what it was doing is you'd be inputting something that had some parameters on the surface, and it would be basically wedging and creating 15 of these, and then with different parameters based on what you you put on between a range of, for instance, here's scale, it's between 0.5 and 2, and it will randomly create that. And inside the node itself, you'll then have a copy of whatever was on the outside with the relative parameters and seeds on the surface for you to do. And then we also had this bounding box layout, which would preview it in a stacking the bounding boxes in kind of like grid or XY or something like that. So it was a good way to preview some of the assets and stuff that you've procedurally generated. So what I've added to improve this node itself is so we have different types now. So we have random, but we also have ascending and descending, and that will evenly go from 0.5 to 2. So if I do ascending like this, and we just get rid of these other ones, and I hit build, you can see now that if I go and change this to an axis, you can see it will just casually go from 0 to the top thing here. What I also have is we also have a weight attribute. So if I do this to not flat, but linear, you'll see that when I build again, you'll see now it's just evenly distributed from the range of 0.5 to 2. And you can do this on descending as well. So if I hit build again, you notice that it goes from the top value all the way to the bottom. So now you have a bit more control over some of the attributes that you want to do. So you want to add one that's random, and then you want one that's kind of evenly spaced between these. But the cool thing as well is this is the weight remapping. So what we can do is if I go for something like sharp, or actually let's do rounded like this. If when I build, you'll notice that it follows the curve itself for distribution. So you'll have, if you wanted, lots of small ones, and then you wanted only kind of like 3 big ones, for instance, you can use these curves to basically alter how the weighting is of the distribution, which is quite useful. So another one we had is I've added a seed per attribute. So this one is if you had multiple attributes, rather than using the global seed, which also changes everything, you could just change an individual one. So if you didn't like the scale, you could change and regenerate a new seed. So if I change this to random, you'll see that if I go and build this, if once I change the seed itself, I'll just show you another quick function as well. Is rather than building, what a build does is it'll go and grab a brand new instance of this and pull it inside. I've actually got one that just does update. So what it will do is it will grab the name of this and look inside at any nodes that have that name, and it will basically set the values. So it won't edit anything in the inside. So now when I do build or change the float here and build again, you'll see that it doesn't jump inside because these are not being created. That just the attributes are being set on the outside, which is quite useful. So once you've built your 15, you can hit this to update, and then you can just kind of change around with some of the parameters to get distribution or whatever you needed. Something like this build, yeah. So maybe ascending. Yeah, you can see now that follows the curve distribution of this, which is quite useful. Descending, build of that. So yeah, I think that will some more useful functionality. But if you have any kind of suggestions, let me know. But yeah, we've added those parameters to this attribute wedge. So here we are with the scene for the align HDRI. And we've added a little bit of functionality to this align HDRI. So if I just comma this for the time being and load this in. So if you remember before, what we had was we had a HDRI that when we rotate, it will automatically update the directional light to face down the sun. Something like this. And what we've added is the ability to invert the alignment now. So when you hit invert alignment, what will happen is your HDRI will now go down down the directional light that you put in. And what this is as you can see here. And what this does is it becomes quite useful because let's say you set up your directional light and you're like, oh, you know, I like this lighting angle for my scene. What you can do now is you can go in and you can swap out any HDRI, and it will reload it in, and it will align perfectly for that sun, you know, for that angle. So it means it's really nice to be able to just drop in a new HDRI. Do I like this color temperature? Is it giving me good reflections? And it'll automatically align to the directional itself, which I think is kind of super useful, especially when you're shifting through different color temperatures and backgrounds and stuff like that. So that's a super powerful tool that we've added there. I think should be really useful. Another thing that we've added as well is on the cutout here, where it was basically cutting out the sun from the surface. What we have now is we have an export file, and if I dive into the actual the COP network, you can see exactly what it's doing. I'll go to compositing view here, and then redo this. So what we have is we have a export for the cutout, and we also have an export for the light itself. So this is the sun, and this will be wrote out as one image, and you'll also have this one as another image, along with something like this. So this was currently black at the moment, but there's an option to switch between them, and this will fill it in, but it will only fill it in. It won't make it as bright as what it was with the original image. So it will kind of just do a clamped fill in, which can be useful sometimes for rather than having pure black, which might come up in the reflections or something like that. So there is a option on the outside to fill black here. So, and you can write that out, and that will write out as an EXR. Yeah. So hopefully you found that one useful. We have a kind of standard terrain, which is just a height field that I've done some erosions and stuff over just to get this kind of feel for that. We have a water surface, which looks something like this. And how I did this, if I get off the smooth thing, how I did this just to get the kind of like surface that looks a bit like a noise, is I just ran it through the ripple solver with the edge that was animated and pulsing, and it will produce a series of ripples. If I can do it at the start here. Yeah, if we put this. Yeah, it just ripples in from the bank, which is kind of interesting. It was very subtle. I was expecting the kind of the look of it to be a bit stronger, but it didn't do it as much as I thought. But you can have a play around with that. But yeah, that was just moving the bank and kind of trying to get some kind of breakup rippling from the water surface. Okay, so now we have some of the grass coverage for the points. This is using a series of kind of scatters, and we're using some of the camera ray masks from some of my previous videos to calculate kind of frustum for this, along with some of the mask makers to get kind of noise and stuff like that. Yeah, as you can see here with the frustum. So that's for the grass. There's a vine setup here, which is using a combination of kind of like near point connections for scatter points on the surface, and then we're running it through Vellum to kind of simulate it with the collision geometry of both the ruin geo here and then the terrain, which gives you this kind of like nice hanging vines. And then with a combination of that as well, I have from the leaves that are spawned on the surface, I've created this kind of like roots that kind of run along the surface, something like this. so that yeah, this is just there's just leaves that are spawning, and then this is using a series of masks and stuff like that. Yeah, the roots come out from the spawn of the leaves, so you get something like that. And then the rocks as well. There's a rock instancer for smaller rocks. So this is all the kind of shoreline pebbles and under the surface, which are smaller. And then there's just a kind of like general rock placement for on the surface. And then yeah, just one of the characters that I've had posed with the sword from a previous video, which we're just placing in. So yeah, this scene's to download with the bundle for all of it. But yeah, you have a look around, and there's also some of the lighting with how I've instanced it and shaded it. That's interesting to have a look at. But yeah, hopefully that kind of useful for how I build some of my lighting scenes and stuff like that.